What does it take to step into a life of purpose, authenticity, and success? Well, today's guest is here to bring you all of the inspiration, truth telling, and vulnerability to ideally inspire you into bringing all of who you are to the table along the way to sustainable success. I can't wait to share more about Kristina. She has been an inspiration. I love everything she does, and getting to know her this past 6 months-ish more deeply through the Brave Hearts Collective has just made me fall in love with her even more. She is the most authentic person. She is the queen of oversharing, but in the best way. I'm sure you'll get the vibe of this today as we laugh our way through. Yeah, she's an absolute light in the world. And I'm excited because I learned more about her story today that I think you will also really appreciate. And it's just such a heartfelt exploration of defining success on your own terms. She talks about how her early experiences really shaped her entrepreneurial spirit and vision. And we talk a lot about her path and the places that led her to exactly where she is today that didn't make a lot of sense at the time, but now she can see how it all lines up. So I'm really excited to share this episode with you. Grab your favorite tea, coffee, smoothie, and enjoy. Hey there, it's Jillian, your guide to all things joy, and this is the Joy Journey Podcast. Oh my God. Welcome to the Joy Journey Podcast, where joy is an inside job. I'm your host, Jillian Shecker, and today we are bringing to you the one and only Kristina Botelho. One and only. I'm so happy to have you here. So before we dive in, I'll just share a little bit about Kristina. She's just a super special woman. I was introduced to her and in her shop like in 2015, so many years ago, when she was literally the only plant-based restaurant in Edmonton. And it was the most delicious smoothie I have. And I feel like that might be what started off my smoothie addiction. But since meeting her and just seeing her journey and really being able to witness her, I've been so inspired. She's got a heart of gold. And Kristina is a visionary entrepreneur, a culinary innovator, and the heart behind kb&co, a plant-based franchise that has redefined what it means to nourish both the body and the soul. Kristina's journey from dream to reality is a testament to her resilience, her passion, and unwavering belief in the power of wholesome, intentional living. She is, and I can say this from personal experience, a woman who absolutely walks the walk. I know her whole morning routine, and it is legit, you guys. As the founder of kb&co, Kristina's cultivated more than a business. She's built an actual community, like a massive, beautiful, heart-based community where health and connection and compassion are all at the forefront. Her ability to pair delicious plant-based food with a deeper mission of sustainability and mindfulness has set her apart in the food industry and beyond. She's actually a thought leader, and I'm so excited for you to hear and feel her heart today. Welcome, KB. Welcome, Kristina.
Wow,
I'm so
thank you,
happy to have you
Jillian.
here.
Happy to be here. And I'm going to take you with me everywhere to introduce me. That
Okay.
was beautiful.
Hired. I'm down. I will make
Just
myself
follow
available.
along, right? Who am I? Jillian. Jillian.
Enter Jillian Shecker. Yeah, no, I
That was
love that.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
love that. And you're so much more. And I can't wait. For me, everything is frequency focused. And I think it's just why, you and I were chatting last week and I was like, will you come on? Because I just think people need to feel you, especially now
Mhm.
in a world that feels very disconnected and with so much struggle and, addiction and pain and suffering, to bring someone on to say like, it's going to be okay. And I think you're an absolute testament to that. And so shall we dive
Ooh,
in?
dive in, dive in.
Yeah. So I think I just kind
Yeah.
of want to warm up with sharing a little bit about your journey. Now, I know this is a very loaded question, but I just feel like if I were to ask you really deeply, like who is Kristina Botelho, like actually, and to pull back the curtain on what looks like a success story. I know you've had some recent challenges that you've shared very publicly, and so we can dive into that. But I just kind of want to give you the floor to share whatever is on your heart so that we can get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, who am I? It's Kristina Botelho. I'm still trying to figure that out, but once I know, I will let you know. That
I'll
is a
have another
very
podcast.
broad. Yeah, exactly. I know what I do know to be true is that I am here to be of service for others. That I know to be true. And that's something that I've really stepped into over the last, I would say like 3, 4 years, was to really step into being of service to others. And I think in some ways I've always been working in that, being of service to others in the way of creating KB&Co. So that's really who I am. That's what I'm really trying to step into more and more.
Mhm.
And I'm just here to give back. I'm here to inspire. I don't think I for one second believe that I went through the many hardships and challenges that I did to just for it to not be shared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So
And so can you share
sure.
what are the hardships that you've been through? Like what have you actually been through to get to what we see as the successful version of you today?
Oh my goodness. That is a loaded question. That is a lot. That is a lot.
Let's talk about life growing
It's
up.
life growing up. Well, I didn't have a, I would say, like, normal or traditional life growing up. I spent my younger years. We'll start with the age of 11. Prior to 11, I was kind of being bounced around between my mom's house and my dad's house. My mom lived in Penticton, BC. My dad lived in Kelowna. So I would kind of go back and forth. They split, I think, when I was around 7 or 8. When I was 11, I ended up leaving home and moved in with my sister who was 13, living with some random guy. She still to this day says it was not her boyfriend. I swear it was her boyfriend, but not her boyfriend, just some random guy that she was living with. She was 13 years old. I think he was in like 18, 19. Kind of in and around 11 and 13, I would couch surf, stay with friends, stay with my sister, and then be bounced around between foster homes and group homes.
Mm,
Got into drugs, nothing in the way that it is today in terms of like the hard drugs, the opioids or meth or things like that, but smoking pot, drinking. I did acid when I was 11. That was an accident though. Somebody had come to where I was staying. There were a couple of guys looking for my older sister, and she wasn't there. And then they had asked me if I wanted to do acid, and I said no because it'll smell. So it'll smell up the house. And they said, no, it's not like that. You just pop it orally and then away you go. So ended up doing acid at the age of 11 and didn't love it. Ended up in the hospital, had my stomach pumped. Didn't love it, but then, weeks later I would do it again at a
mm,
party. So definitely not not living the way that most 11, 12, 13 year olds should be living.
mhm.
Um, geez, yeah. And then from the time I was 13 to 15, I was staying with my mom, my biological mom, and then ended up at 15 getting pregnant with my firstborn. This was all in BC. And I met my firstborn's father in BC, and he was actually from Edmonton.
Wow.
It's crazy because I had, didn't know anything about Edmonton. It was him who would bring me back to, or bring me to Edmonton to reside. He's from here. I thought it would be best if I moved back here with him and start a life here. So that's what I did at the age of 15. Moved to Edmonton, had my firstborn, went back to school, dropped out of school. Obviously, I was kind of in and out of school. I would say, in fact, I just spoke of this last night to my oldest son. We were talking about education and stuff. And I said, I don't even think I went to grade 7 or 8. I think I skipped grade 7 or 8, went to grade 9, and then had to drop out to have my child. So, wow, I ended up going to a school here that had just opened up called Terra, and it was a school for pregnant teen moms. And I finished my high school years there, here in Edmonton, while trying to raise my firstborn.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what brought me to Edmonton.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like challenge number, well, maybe not one, but like, significant challenge, young, pregnant, moving on your own. It feels like from a very young age, just kind of trying to figure it out on your own.
Totally. Yeah.
And then, yeah, I remember Tara. That's amazing that you were able to finish school. Like a lot of people probably wouldn't have the
No.
ability to do that or the persistence to do it.
Yeah. No. You know what? I met a lot of people at the school that I would say probably wasn't or didn't seem committed, right, to the process. Like it was an opportunity to have your kids taken care of while you educate yourself. What a great opportunity. I think there were a lot of people there that during my time that I felt like were still kind of stuck in this maybe chaos or what they were going through.
Mhm.
For me, I always say there was a home that I was in when I was 12 years old. It was a foster home. It was a mother. Her name was Donna, and I only know that because it's a wild story. Just recently, last year, I had actually reached out to her, but I couldn't remember her name at the time. But she was from what I gathered, single older lady whose husband worked out of town. When I landed in her home, she was just like, her home was so perfect,
Mhm.
like white picket fence home. large yard, horses, kind of ranch style home, ranch style bungalow, really cozy, comfortable decor. I had a beautiful bedroom. I had a clean bedroom. It's crazy that these things would be like this, these things would have wow factor when you haven't had these things. Like it's like these are just things that a normal child should have, right?
Mhm.
But for me, I remember looking at her like she would get up in the morning and feed us. She would feed us this like great big breakfast. She had like she had milk in like the glass jars. I remember thinking when I am a mom, when I have a child, I'm going to be just like you. I'm going to be normal and raise my child the way that you're raising us. And so when I got pregnant with my son, I mean, the idea of like continuing to smoke pot, which was like, and it wasn't like I didn't have any addiction issues. All of that like fell to the wayside. Like drinking, I was going to be like Donna, the home, and I was going to create an environment in the same way that Donna created for me. I had a very clear vision of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to be as a mother when I got
Mm.
pregnant. It's crazy to say like at 15 years old or 16. But so for me, going back to school, like I took that process very seriously. Like this was an opportunity, this was a gift, right? And I really wanted to do something with my life. I didn't want to be another statistic. The feelings that I would go through being 15 and pregnant, right? Like the stereotypes and the judgments that I'd have to face really fueled my desire to make something of my life because I didn't want to be another welfare case. I didn't want, it was hard enough being judged. So I think
Mhm.
that for me, it was, for whatever reason, it was having my son really fueled my ambition.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm like just sitting in the way in which you responded to that. So mature for your age at that time.
Mhm.
Did you feel when that happened? Like, did you feel a victim of it? Did you feel victim of circumstance? Or were you just like, I'm fucking giving her? Like, what was that? What was your response to it all at the time?
I mean, I obviously wasn't being safe. Right? Again, I wasn't trying to get pregnant, but
Yeah.
I clearly wasn't being safe. I had never been on birth control ever in my life. I mean, I have 3 kids plus another, but I had I had nobody to really guide me towards those things. Like I didn't really know how to handle, I mean, sure, condoms, but like that, I was so irresponsible. But I remember feeling like okay, this is great. See, when I was 10, I was 10 going on 16. And when I was 16, I felt like I was 16 going on 20. So getting pregnant, I guess, and at that time felt like, all right, well, this makes sense. Like I'm older now. And I wasn't older. I just always felt like I was older.
Mhm.
And given what I had gone through, I felt like my party days were behind me. I
Ready to
hadn't even, I hadn't even,
put on
wait, I
my
did,
nightgown and
right.
shut her down.
Yeah, exactly. When I'm 16 years old. But I was going to say that I had never been to bars, but that's not true. I did sneak into bars when I was in Pennington. There was this one bar called Tiffany's that I would actually sneak into every now and then. But, I was at the age of 11, 12. I know that I looked about 15, 16.
Mm.
Like makeup and, do my hairspray, the back combed hair, like the whole, I looked older. And when I met the father of my firstborn, he's actually the father of my oldest 2 children. He was actually 21 and I was 15. So that would appear wrong on so many levels, but I did lie about my age and I did come across as very mature,
Yeah.
right? So
And it was a
um
different time.
very different time. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now I'd be like, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Not for my daughter,
Yeah.
but wait, that's another story. If she's
Oh my
15 bringing home a 21-year-old, like that's not happening.
yeah.
That's not happening, right?
Yeah. It's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Definitely not okay. It's not okay for anybody else listening. Um, for all you listeners, I felt excited about it. So I wasn't nervous. I also had a really great partner. So his name is Eric, the father of my oldest 2. He was like committed to taking care of the kids. Like he was great. He said, move to Edmonton. This is where his roots are here. His family is here. He'll take care of me. He bought us a house over in the Mill Creek area at the time and allowed me to go back to school. So there was no pressure for me to have to work or earn income. He certainly wasn't like a sugar daddy. Like he wasn't balling, but he made enough to support us and he
Yeah.
supported whatever I needed to do, which for me at that time was just to try to get my education so that I wasn't perceived as this like I don't know, dropout loser statistic that of course you got pregnant young, like it just makes sense that you wouldn't have gone to school, you wouldn't be able to achieve anything,
Mhm.
you know?
I love it. So,
Mm-hmm.
obviously seeing the blessings as you were moving through that experience at a very young age.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
love that. What other challenges you been through?
Oh my goodness.
I know.
So many.
But let's just say like what so yeah, when you look back, like at the most pivotal points where I think most of us think, or when you're in the humanness, it's like, oh my God, this sucks. This is the worst thing ever. But then after you can see how it actually lined up, or how maybe even, it's not happening to it like for us, but actually through us. And are there places that you can see right now where
I
that is the
mean,
case?
my entire life, Jalen, like my entire life from a very early age. I was thinking the other night about sort of my like from 9 to 11. And there was a time when I was 11 years old and I was on the street. I spent a lot of time on the streets too, like couch surfing in the way of knocking on friends' doors to see if they had a place where I could stay. And if not, I would just sleep on park benches. One time
Mm,
slept in somebody's garage because it was open and just like slept in the back seat of their car. There was one day when I was 11, I was on the street sitting on this bench and this homeless guy was sitting next to me who I actually think today was that was all purposeful, like just angel type.
mm,
But he was sitting beside me and I had this steak knife in my hand. Now I don't know if I was I don't recall being like suicidal, but I had a steak knife with me. I don't know why I did it, but I remember this experience where this homeless guy was sitting next to me and he said, "Oh, what are you gonna do with that knife?" And I just remember like playing with it and I was like, "I don't know." And he went on to tell me that I was gonna do big things. And he said, "You're gonna do big things with your life. You'd be silly to do anything, to yourself or harm yourself." And I remember thinking, like, "Oh, I'm not gonna harm myself. Like I'm too chicken shit. Like I don't want to hurt myself." But I remember him telling me that I was gonna do big things. And I've always felt that from a very young age. I've always felt like being bounced around between my dad and my mom and in the environment that I was raised in, I always knew that it was like uncomfortable. It wasn't right. Something wasn't right, but I really didn't have anything to compare it to because I wouldn't have known what other homes are like. Like I'd gone to friends' house who like their homes looked normal, but until you're actually, I think like in another environment for a more long-term time, I think
mhm,
you don't really understand like the contrast, right? But I just think everything that I have gone through has been so purposeful. I came to Edmonton and I ended up getting my education. I moved back to BC. I went and dabbled into college, but then learned that I could buy a business using an indigenous grant, a
mm,
government grant. So I actually bought my first business. I bought into a franchise. It was a Quiznos franchise.
mm,
And I was 22 years old, 22 when I opened my very own business utilizing a government grant. And then from there, I was like, which is actually kind of funny because it's Quiznos, like it's meat and cheese, right? There's sauce. And like
definitely
I
not
would,
plant-based. Maybe some lettuce.
but listen, I tell you, like whatever I'm in, like I am committed and I am your
Yeah.
best ambassador.
You
And
could
I
sell shit
remember,
popsicles to nuns in
oh,
white
I
glove.
could absolutely, if I believe in it, I believe in it. Like you know. And at the time they had they still might like the black Angus steak sub. And by the way, I will say Quiznos at the time was the Starbucks sub. So it was a very expensive product, but it was like it wasn't a Subway, it was sort of an elevated like
Yeah.
Subway, but the Ferrari of Subways, if you will. But I remember just being such a like I was such a and I'm naturally like a perfectionist, and I mean that's a whole other story, but as to why. But I remember just like I was such an ambassador, and there were other franchisees in the city who had opened like Quiznos shops, and they were now at the time Quiznos when they came into Canada, like you were not allowed to use mayo or mustard. Like they had their signature dressings, but
Mm,
no mayo or mustard. And so sometimes I would get customers that would come into my store and they'd say, "Can I get some mayo or mustard?" And I'd say, "Well, we don't use mayo or mustard." And then they would tell me about a location across the city that uses mayo or mustard. So what
right.
do you think I did? Like I, of course, put on my big hat and shades and I went and paid
No
a
way mustard
visit.
shopping.
I was like, the hell they are. And so yeah, I would like investigate and then I would tell them. I would tell corporate that
Snitches get stitches.
so is
Brave woman.
it's true. I'm like so and so's using mustard and mayo, and I know that's not allowed. So Listen, listen. I was such a like, and then they would do these quality audit reports, which every franchise or every franchise system like has that sort of policy in place where Quiznos representative will come into the stores and do these audits once a month. And the representative that would come into my store to do these audits, he would try so hard to not fail me, but like get me lower than like 99 because he would say like 99 is not even like it's not even a realistic score. I'm like, my store is
It's
perfect.
Wayne
Like
Gretzky, sir.
yeah, thank you very much. The greatest. It is the greatest. I love that. So I I was very much like I mean, I just anything that I put my mind to, I excelled at. Like I really wanted to be the best, the best. So and I was. And then I really wanted the guy who was coming in, I really wanted his job. I said, what does it take to like get your job? And he's like, you're too young and you don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, look, I'm the one who like got everybody else in trouble. Like, look at me. Like,
I'm meant to be quality
I'm
control.
yeah, I am for sure.
I'm meant to mark people and report people 1000%.
Exactly. And so it took about a year and a half of like pestering the VP of operations for Quiznos Canada. We would have these marketing meetings where Quiznos Canada would come to Edmonton and all of the franchisees from Alberta would come up to like the Hotel Mac and we'd have this like full afternoon on like marketing initiatives. And I would always like make my way over to the VP and the president and be like, hey, so it's me. And so look, what's the squeaky wheel gets the oil or the oil, something like that.
We're turning
Squeaky
that
wheel
one
gets
around.
the oil.
The most wins the cheese.
Yes. So after a bit of, I don't know, like we'll just say like persistence, I ended up landing the role of director of operations for Quiznos Canada.
Wow.
I know.
That's a big
I
deal. I had
was,
no idea.
yeah, I was 24. I was 24 and my territory was Western Canada. And so I was in charge of audit reports, which was going into a Quiznos store every single month
Without a
across
disguise.
well, sometimes they'd lock me out. Sometimes they would like lock the door. They see me coming because it's intimidating and you have the ability to shut them down
Right.
if you feel like their store needs to be shut down. So there were definitely a handful of stores that were not, doing things the way they were supposed to be. Like one store is like making eggs in the morning, that kind of thing. Like wanted to serve a breakfast sandwich. We didn't have a breakfast sandwich, but so it was a very, yeah, it was like, I mean, what a bougie role. I was making really good money. I also still have my Quiznos store, but I tell you, I was traveling 3.5 weeks out of the month. So I was always on the road. I was flying to like Fort Mac for the day, then back, Grand Prairie for the day, then back, then Fort St. John for the day, then back. Like it just was, and I had 2 kids at the time. So it was very taxing on the family. But truthfully, like I didn't care because I really wanted to like, I mean, what a thing to gloat about, right? Like,
Mm.
and then, during this time, like I'm rubbing shoulders with other directors and VPs and hanging out with the president of Quiznos Canada. They all know how old I am, but I would sometimes like not want to share that I had kids because then they'd say, "Oh, how old?" And then I'd have to say that, my oldest is like 7, and then they'd say, "Oh, or 8," and then they'd say, "Oh, so you were like 10 when you had your kid?" And that's embarrassing because I really wanted to be this like professional, like not. I was embarrassed of my background. I was embarrassed of my childhood. I was embarrassed of my upbringing.
Mm.
But it was a wild experience. And not only was I doing audits, but I was also opening new stores. So anytime that a franchisee would open a Quiznos, I was sent out to essentially like get their team totally staffed up, trained, and then set up their store with them. And then
Wow.
stick around for like 2 weeks while they open or 10 days and, work with them through the opening phase. Given where I am today, right? Like
Yeah.
I would be in that franchise world. I would learn how to open stores. I would learn how to like like
Do quality control.
control. Thank you. Yeah. I ended up leaving Quiznos after I did 3 years of that, but there was just so much travel. It just was like I mean, like a hotel every night just wasn't, there was no appeal to it anymore. So I ended up looking for work locally in the franchise industry. And there's not a lot in Edmonton, given like a lot of the franchise stores are out of like, say, Calgary, Vancouver, or Toronto.
Mhm.
But I came across Booster Juice, which was a local franchise. And so I had dropped off a resume and then called, like a few hundred times to say that I dropped off a resume and that I am
Persistence.
very, yeah, persistent. I'm very qualified for this job. And I just want something in this, like the franchise space. And so I ended up a year and a half later getting a job with Booster Juice as a franchise business consultant,
Oh,
where I would then work with franchisees, a lot of, I mean, like hundreds of franchisees with Booster Juice. So again, working with franchisees and understanding territories in different markets. And then from there, my husband at the time and I both left and we partnered with a group here in Edmonton to start a franchise. They already had an existing concept that they wanted to franchise. So they partnered with us to grow it. We grew it to about locations. And then the partnership, that's a lesson in itself. Like partnerships are very tricky and tough. And we didn't have the same vision. So when that,
may I ask what it
yep.
was?
Yeah, it was
What
Cafe
franchise?
Sorrentino.
Oh, wow.
Cafe,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
Cafe Sorrentino. Yeah. Like a very old school group behind the concept, like an old school Italian group. Sorrentinos, they have a really good reputation. Like their brand, like their restaurants have been around forever. And they wanted to take sort of a Sorrentinos and turn it into sort of a cafe version and then franchise it.
Mm,
But I think that in the franchise space and world, like you wouldn't go to one McDonald's and get something and not at the other, right? Like it is a very consistent, like that's the
point.
whole concept, right? And the point. So I think that our partners were just had a hard time with that, right? They wanted each location to kind of cater to the demographic that was in that area.
Mhm.
If this like specific location really liked muffins, then we should serve muffins here. But this store doesn't, so let's not do muffins, like that kind of thing. And it just was too hard to work with. It's too hard. So
Yeah.
we ended up leaving, and it left us both unemployed. So we were partners in a location, a Cafe Sorrentino location inside City Center Mall. And so I ran that location operationally on a daily basis. And so I would get to know a lot of like directors and VPs of various companies and of the mall, which was owned by Oxford Properties. Because they just come in for coffee or for lunch and it's just sort of like chit chat here and there. But when we exited the partnership, I was walking through City Center Mall and ran into one of the directors for Oxford Properties who approached me and asked me if there'd be any interest in me doing leasing, which I was like, why? All I knew was that I can't work 9 to 5 because of my shitting schedule.
Which is fascinating.
We'll get to that. But
We'll
I
definitely
just,
discuss
I,
this further.
I'm like, I cannot do a 9 to 5. But like, I will work my ass off. I cannot be told to like be somewhere, like, tell me what to do. I'll do it all day long. But this like idea of
I
working
hear
this,
you.
like, right. It's like, I
Other
like,
entrepreneurs, like, does that like, how,
yeah,
like, it's just
yeah.
once you've had that freedom, it's really hard to go back.
Totally, totally. So I ended up taking on the role. I had no idea so it was essentially retail leasing. I had to lease out space,
Mm,
a sales job. And I was given a budget, which like I love because you tell me to bring in 1 million, I'll bring you two kind of thing. Like I'm an overachiever, so don't worry. But I had no idea how to do the role. Like
noted.
it was hilarious. Like I would sit in my office. To backtrack, I wasn't given like flexibility on so I had to be, it was like a 9 to 5, but I was told that if I bring in or more what was required from the budget that they would allow me to work from home.
Okay.
So that was my goal, was to like bring in what they asked and some, and then I'd have the flexibility to work from home. So I just, it was hilarious because I would just sit up this like big, I had an assistant, I had this big office, and I would just sit there and look at like lease agreements, and I had no idea what I was doing. I just was like, my assistant would come in, I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I don't know.
Anyone else have no idea what you're doing.
I just like, and so through these times, I remember when I was with Quiznos driving to territories where I couldn't fly or where didn't make sense for me to fly to, because I would, I'd go to Lloydminster, or not Lloydminster, Lethbridge, but I'd go Calgary, then Lethbridge. It just made sense that I drive. I remember driving and I do my best thinking when I'm driving. I crank the music and I just do my best thinking. I remember thinking, what the hell am I doing? Like, how
Mm,
did I get here? How did I get here? And where is this taking me? What does this all mean? I obviously wanted the role. I got the role, but why did I want the role so badly? And where is this going to lead me? Sitting in the office when I was in my new cushy leasing manager job, I'm like, where is this going to lead me? Like, I have no idea how to fucking, and like, you dictate the rent. So when somebody says, I want to rent a space, you can like,
5
5,000,
million.
okay, I don't know. Like, yeah, I'm just like, I had no idea how it works. I just knew that I had to bring in, I think at the time it was about $650,000 in revenue for that year, and I think I brought in a full year 1.1 million. And I was putting anybody anywhere, like just I got a space for you, and I got a
I
space
wonder
for you,
where they
and
are now. We need to go
just
after everyone that you worked with at that time. That is so funny.
seriously. But I really through that time had no idea like where this was going to lead me, where it was going to guide me, like what, and also thinking that okay, maybe I climb the corporate ladder, right? Like I could do that. Maybe I land like a VP role, and I will say like I get bored easily, and I do like a challenge.
Mhm.
So
Perfect for entrepreneurship. Okay, first thing is around your level of trust. So from a very young age being on your own and really needing to use your own resources to create whatever success was for you. But I think what I'm sensing is like A, your persistence, B, your ability to ask for what you actually want, C, your also this ability to tap into your natural strengths and gifts
mhm,
and be like,
mhm,
okay, now what? And I think this desire to be always expanding, like reaching for something that feels exciting and new, which is very visionary of you, you know?
mhm,
Sometimes we
mhm.
could think of those things as trauma responses, like when it's turned
Sure.
up too loud to the point where maybe we're not deepening in or really planting those roots. But I could see how everything you did, and I'm sure you're going to tell us more of amazing things you've done
Mhm,
because it all does make sense when you look back on it, but really did lead to like the next thing, which supported, your highest good. So did you have a strong belief, like a spiritual belief when you were younger? Like, did you feel the universe supporting you? Did you feel like, I know you're a little wooey like me.
mhm, mhm,
Did you
mhm.
feel that? Were you like actively manifesting or were you just kind of like trusting your instincts?
I would say that I have always actively manifested. I would always, probably before, like I wasn't intentionally trying to get pregnant, but I will say that I thought a lot about it. And I thought when I have a kid, I could see my house, I could see how I was raising my child, and then I would get pregnant and I would raise my child exactly how I would visualize raising my child. I grew up like I would say definitely spiritual in and out of religion. My mom was like she was Christian, then she wasn't Christian. So like we'd be dragged to this church, that church, like it was believe in God, okay, doesn't really matter. Like that kind of it was very
Yeah.
inconsistent. But I had a very traumatic experience that I would just learn in recent years was that I had some form of PTSD.
Mm.
PTSD, is that the right?
Yeah.
When I was 10, not 9 years old, when I was 9 years old, we were living in Langley. I mean, my mom bounced around everywhere. So we were in Langley for like 6 months. And I was walking home from school with a friend and we were chased by by a man in a van.
Wow.
And, and, and so like likely to be kidnapped. I don't know, but chased for a good stretch until we got to her house, and he even went to like pull into her driveway until we would like get in the house, slam the door, and then see him pull away from outside or from the window. After that had happened, I spent probably 2 months hearing voices. So I would hear, whew, I would. I would hear voices, and at nighttime, I would hear a lot of, I'd be in my room and I would hear somebody running up and down the stairs, and everybody was asleep, everybody was in bed. When my mom would step out, and I have a lot of siblings, which we might get into. I had eight siblings, and I had at the time 4 younger ones that I was looking after from the age of like 6 months to like 3 years old.
Mm.
And so anytime my mom would step out, she would leave me with the kids and just tell me to watch them. And then I would scoop up all the kids into a room, and I would shut the door and turn off the light, and I would sit behind the door and I would cry and like rock myself, and the kids they'd be crying and like what's going on, and I'm like we just have to stay in here until mom gets back. We have to stay in here. Like I was so fucking terrified, Jillian. I was so scared
Mm.
that I was going to be we were next, or like I don't even I just remember being terrified. And so for 2 months, I would hear voices at night. My mom would come into the room and she would tell me to say, I rebuke that in the name of Jesus. And so I would say, when I would hear the voices and all this talking and noise that would try to enter, I would say, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And then everything would stop.
Mm.
And then I would try to go to sleep. And then I would start to hear that like just terrifying for any 9-year old.
Yeah.
And so my mom had taken me to a church, I want to say maybe Catholic. maybe Christian. She'd take me to a church where a priest had stood in front of me and two ladies on each side of my shoulders. And it was like a 2 hour, like they spoke in tongues. They
Mm.
spoke in tongues and spoke in tongues. And then, I mean, I can't remember releasing anything in that moment, but since that day forward, I had like the voices had stopped. And so
Wow.
my mom to this day would say, she always likes to tell the story about when I was possessed. I mean, my head wasn't spinning around my body, but she would always say, "I remember when you were possessed and we had to take you to the." But I would say that that was post traumatic stress
Mm.
of something going on. But from that moment on, I always believed there was like God was like there was someone, something, someone guiding me.
Mm.
And there is just no way that I would go through, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13, like hanging out on the streets, going to parties where there are a lot of older men and walking down alleys that you probably shouldn't walk down at 2 in the morning and be protected.
Yeah.
Like I was never, you know, raped, or there was never anything that had like anything really traumatic that had happened or
Mhm.
that would happen to me. And I always felt like, and then I would test like when I was 15, 16, I would, I remember I would test God, like test my faith. I would say, God, there's one time where my freezer wasn't working. Like I had a drop in or like a big a cube freezer
Mhm.
and it wasn't working. And my boyfriend at the time, kid's father, was out of town and it wasn't working. And I was like plugging it in and out. And then I just like held the cord and I just prayed and said, like, God, I really need this freezer to work. And like I'd plug it in and then I'd hear the like ding and it would start working. And I feel like I always knew that God was real. I just hadn't been like, reading the Bible and practicing
Like
religion.
religious,
Right.
more
Right.
spiritual, spiritually
Totally.
connected. I
I
love
would
that.
say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I really resonate with that story of like young trauma around spirituality. I also had a really crazy experience when I was in grade 7, and it reminds me of what you experienced, where I literally
Mm.
questioned reality after the experience, and my mom hired I'm just going to share the story.
Yeah, please do.
Okay,
Yeah, because
cuz
I'm
like
I'm
coffee
hooked. Yeah,
talk,
so like please don't stop. Yeah.
coffee talk. Okay, wait.
Yeah.
So I was in grade 7, and one of my best friends at the time kept going to the older girl's house at lunchtime. And I was like, "What are you doing over there?" And she wouldn't tell me. She was going over the grade niners. And
Mm.
I really wanted to go.
Like, I wanna hang
So
out too.
so they finally invited me one day, me and another girl from class, and we went. We went downstairs to the basement. They're like, "Okay, we're gonna have a seance." And
Mhm.
so they gave us the rules. Everyone has to hold hands, and no one can break the circle or else evil will get in. There was a candle in the middle, and when it started, the girl kind of guiding, screamed a blood curdling scream and then blew out the candle, and my whole body just like, well, freaked the fuck out. Um, and I just remember like there's screaming, there's yelling, and then someone came down the stairs like in the dark with blood all over and holding a knife. And I just grabbed this person's hand, this person's hand, I joined them together and I ran. Like I ran like, when you see people run like as fast as I possibly could. And I ran
Yeah.
so fast. It was just like horror films. Like she was chasing me and I got to the front door and it felt like there was 1 million locks. And I unlocked.
Yeah.
I was just like trying to,
Yeah.
my hands were shaking, just trying to fucking get out of this house. I opened the door and I ran. I ran to school. It was winter in my socks. And yeah,
Oh,
and so the whole way home, I just like for the rest of the day, I actually just I feel like I like myself my spirit like shattered that day because I didn't know what was happening. Like it was just so scary. And
mhm.
I feel like we're kind of speaking the same language around that
Mhm.
kind of trauma where it's just next level. Anyway, so I walked home that day after school and I thought the devil was like I felt evil. Like I could sense it. It
Mm.
was really wild. And I was like, I had I can't explain it aside from just questioning reality. And I went home. I told my mom what happened because I was really fucked up. And she had a friend who did EMDR at the time and came
Okay.
over and
Yeah.
did EMDR, which is like, feels like nuns and tongues or EMDR, like something to support the energetics of what's going on. And that was really helpful. But it was, yeah, it's like, I don't dabble with any of that shit because even when I was studying shamanism, I was like, I'm very sensitive to energy. now. And I
Mhm.
think I always was, but that for me was where when you were speaking, I feel like I actually connected more deeply to God from then on. And that's probably where my spiritual journey like really, really began in terms of
Yeah,
feeling the presence of something loving and protective. And I also, thank God
totally.
haven't had like any sort of trauma, but like in terms of, the things you were speaking of, like I also was a little shit. And I
Mhm.
got into like I could have got into a lot of trouble in my life
Mhm.
and sneaking out when I was 11, 12, drinking
Mhm.
and, hanging out with older guys and just all of it. And nothing ever happened to me, thank God. And so I really identify and I just felt I
Y
should share too.
I love that. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Wow.
Mhm.
I mean, that feeling that like that you would have felt running, right? Like there's no I don't even know how to like what to compare that to. Like that feeling of maybe I feel that when like my child I was gonna say runs away, but my child my children don't run away. But when you like I was shopping yesterday and Aaliyah had just I like was looking at her and then I grabbed the yogurt and then she like went down and I just that like that fear that
Fear,
like oh
primal
it's
fear.
it's the worst.
We're gonna pause here and we're coming back next week for part 2. Part 2. That's 2 in French.
There
Okay,
has to be
now
a part 2.
now, Al, just in case. Okay, I know you're shocked that there's even more to talk about, but we are still just diving into things. So we're gonna catch up next week with Christina